Hello and welcome to another one of my videos. I'm Charles Bernard. I'm an illustrator. I mainly paint paperback book covers. That's what I'm interested in doing. Story illustration, that's what interests me. And I used to work for the famous artist schools in Westport, Connecticut in the art department. I also made a lot of art instruction videos for major magazines like Imagine FX. I also have an online art school called the Online Art Academy, where I have an art course that has been designed specifically for those of you who want to become illustrators. So if you're interested in wanting to take an art course, you might want to check out my course at the link that you'll find down below, where it says onlineartacademy.com. One of the great illustrators of all time was Bob Peak, and Bob Peak was one of the guiding faculty members for the famous artist schools. And the illustration that you see here was done by Bob Peak. In this video, I'm going to be talking about color composition and color design. What makes this illustration here so effective is not the subject matter, but rather how Peak painted the subject matter. And how did he paint it? Well, he designed the subject matter. He applied the principles of design, and that's what you're responding to. Not so much that there's this guy yelling and looking through the binoculars at a football game. That's the concept, but it's the principles of design that are being applied, the principles of color, the principles of composition. That's what makes this illustration look so visually exciting. A feast for the eye. You can't take your eyes away from this. So what is it that makes color composition? Well, one of the things that makes a good color composition is color emphasis. Peak wants us to look here where the binoculars are in which you see the football players. So how does he get you to look here? Well, for one thing, it's done through strong value contrast. You see the white here? It's actually an off-white against the really dark blue of the binoculars. So the strong value contrast attracts your eye here. However, it's not just that. It's also the fact that he uses a color accent. This blue is a color accent, and it has been placed against the hot red color. So you have the cool blue placed against the hot red color, and that creates emphasis here. So your eye is drawn there. Peak only uses 3 colors. The color on the football player here is actually a green, and then there's the blue, of course, and the red. So what he did here constitutes color design because of that principle of emphasis that he's applying, as well as the principle of color dominance. And we can see here that the color that dominates is, of course, the red, and he creates variations of that red, which adds a lot of interest to this illustration and helps to model the forms. You have the light and shadow, chiaroscuro, and he uses the off-white here and here because white always attracts a lot of attention in an illustration, especially when surrounded by dark values like you see there. So this is where the strongest value contrast occurs. Nowhere else is the value contrast as strong as where the binoculars are. And that's where you find the sharpest edge. All of this is part of what makes a good composition. So in this illustration, Peak offers a fresh approach on how a football game is seen in an illustration. Here's a quick rough sketch that I did. Sci-fi subject. And I'm going to apply this principle of emphasis that Peak applied to his illustration. I establish, first of all, the dominant color, which is going to be red like in Peak's illustration. But in Peak's illustration, there's also variations of that red that leans a bit more like to red-orange a little bit. So there are these slight shifts in color that take place. But I'm going to keep things simple here. I'm going to add the saturated red like this. Then I'll add a variation of that red by adding a really dark, desaturated red, something like this, on the back of this character here. I'm doing this in real time, really quick, but it's not going to be perfect. Just want to show you this principle of emphasis being applied, and then the others back here also get this darker, more grayed red, but it gets a bit lighter as it moves back. So let's say they're on a spaceship, and this circle back here, that's the window on the spaceship. And I'll connect that dark of space with the dark of this pod-like structure that this character is in. Then I'm going to add blue to this character right there. So it's this blue against this dark desaturated red, and that creates color emphasis using that same principle of design that Peak uses. Now, those other characters are going to be red because I don't want that blue being repeated on the other characters. By having the blue only on the character in the front here creates a stronger emphasis. The eye isn't distracted to other parts that would also have blue. Then I can add some variations of that blue by adding a darker blue on his sword that he's holding. And then I'll add a lighter blue up here. Something like this, maybe. And let's say he has red hair. And I'm going to soften that form back there by adding a lighter tone over it. So I'm actually adding atmospheric perspective, even though this is indoors. You can do that, and that helps to create a feeling of depth. And it helps to make something that's not that important appear less important, because you're reducing the amount of contrast on that shape or form. There's more contrast in the foreground here than there is in the background. So I added a couple of planets back here. And I'll add some light falling on those planets, something like that. And I'll add a few stars here and there, make it look more like space. I think I'm going to add some cast shadows like this. Watch what happens when I add that blue to the other aliens in those other pods, like this, for example, and over here. See, now that blue in the foreground doesn't seem to have the kind of impact that it had before. Its power has been reduced somewhat. However, by repeating that blue, the eye moves to those other blues. So your eye goes to that blue, then that, and then over here to that blue. So it's a way of directing the eye, moving the eye within the color design. And by repeating the blue in the foreground no longer looks as isolated as it did before. It all depends on what you want to do, what you want to achieve. You want that color accent to have more power? Well, then don't repeat it anywhere else. Or do you want that color accent to be repeated so that the eye of the viewer will then move to those other color accents? In Peak's illustration, as you can see, that blue isn't repeated anywhere else. He wants your eye to be riveted on those binoculars. So for my little rough color sketch here, I think I'm going to remove those other blues and just keep that blue on that one foreground alien like that. I want that powerful color accent that immediately draws your eye to this alien and in effect rivets your eye there, just like Peak is riveting your eye on those binoculars. So I'm going to be talking about color, and I'm going to first do this really quick and rough sketch here, let's say of a Roman, and he's holding a sword. I'm doing this in real time, and let's see, something like this maybe. He has his arm stretched out, and his fingers holding sword. Maybe something like this, and he has a cape on. And let's say this guy doesn't have a helmet. Usually the Romans have a helmet. This guy doesn't, but he does have a beard. So something like that. As you can see, I added some columns back there and a suggestion of a Roman building. Just add some kind of setting here to help establish who this is and where this is taking place. I'm going to quickly add some color like this. You have to decide whether you're going to select an analogous color scheme or a contrasting color scheme. A contrasting color scheme is more appropriate for a mood of conflict. So as you can see here, the strong contrasting hues help to depict a scene that suggests violence, conflict. So the strong red and blue hue contrast helps to create this feeling of mood. Whereas opposed to a mood of conflict, like a more romantic mood, in that case, it would be more appropriate to use analogous colors. Like, for example, if I change the blue to this more red, violet color like this, now these colors are more closely related to each other. There's more harmony of color here than strong contrasting colors. Not that this is a more romantic subject here. I'm just showing you the kind of colors that would be used to create a more harmonious color relationship if this was a more romantic scene. And then the yellow color of his skin needs to be made a bit more reddish, like that. And now all these colors are closely related. There's red, red-orange, red-violet. They're analogous colors on the color wheel. Obviously, I'm doing this really quick, so it's not going to be perfect. The color of daylight changes from morning till evening due to changes in the atmosphere. And the colors of the night are, for example, blue, like this. The color of the night could also be more of a green, something like this, or violet. Now, when it comes to daylight, any of the warm colors like orange will suggest daylight, or yellow, like this. That helps to make it feel more like daylight. Or you could use a yellow ochre. That's one of the earth colors, like this. Or a burnt sienna, something like this, which is a reddish orange, one of the earth colors. Now, what you could also do is you could set up a color key. So you would key your colors to the dominant color. Just like there's a value key, there's also a color key. So how would that work? Well, first of all, you need to learn the color wheel. If you don't know the color wheel, it's important that you learn it. And here you see the color wheel with all the colors indicated. Well, let's say I pick up the blue here. The blue becomes the dominant color in my little rough sketch there. And then I key some other colors to that blue. Like, for example, blue-violet. Add that. So I'm creating a range of colors here, just like I would create a range of values in the value key. And then I'm going to pick up the violet. So I have these analogous colors that are keyed to the blue here, but I also need opposing colors. And just like in a value key, you have opposing values. You have a certain more compressed range of values, which are closely related values. And then you have a few that are further apart from the more compressed values. So you have more value contrast. And the same with a color key. I have colors that are close together like this, more compressed on the color wheel. But then I have other colors that are further away from those more analogous colors, and they contrast more strongly. Like, for example, the red-orange, I could add that. So I'm keying it to the blue, which means that now I have selected a strong hue contrast to the blue, and then also, let's say, a red. So here I have my color key. Then I can apply that to my sketch. So I start off, let's say, with the blue. All of this is blue. Becomes the dominant color, that is, in terms of size, the amount of area it takes up. And maybe also a blue cape, a lot darker. Now I'm doing this in real time, really quick, like this. And say over here. So there's a lot of the blue that I have now. And then the other colors will take up a less amount of area or space. And this is called color proportion. So now let's say for his armor, I'm using color imaginatively here, not realistically. That color is going to be the violet. And then let's say the lower part here is going to be the blue-violet, something like that. Then I'll use the red-orange, but it needs to be changed, of course. And let's see, maybe something like that for his skin. So I'm using less of that warm color than the other colors. The cool colors I'm using more of, the warmer colors I'm using less of, and they help to create emphasis. And then the red, I'm going to use the red on his hair. So he has red hair, something like this, and even a red beard. And I'll repeat the blue on his sword, and then a lighter blue over here on this design that he has on the sword there. So it's rough, but I think you get the idea here. So all the colors in my sketch are keyed to the blue. This is one way to get good color. There are, of course, other ways as well. Now, a simple contrasting color pattern can be obtained by using a cool silhouette or mass on a warm background, like what I'm going to show you now. So I'm going to add dark blue here. Then I'm going to change the color to more of a, let's say, blue-violet. Dark blue-violet against more of a blue. And the face will also be more blue. Let's say this character is more in shadow. I'll add a blue to his face and arm and hand like this. Also, his sword is going to be a dark blue. And now I'll add a warm background color, like this orange. So here you see an example of a simple color pattern. And the reverse works just as effectively, having warm colors in the foreground and cool colors in the background. So here you see an illustration by Bob Peak. And the colors that he used here are the earth colors, like burnt sienna, raw sienna, burnt umber. In other words, the brown colors. They are the earth colors. Peak thought that it needed something more to really spark up the entire illustration. So what do you think he did to give this illustration that extra spark, that jolt that it needed? Whenever you have a color design that you feel isn't lively enough, exciting enough, what you do is you add a really saturated color, which is what Peak did. And I'm going to show you what that color looks like. And there it is. A really saturated red, but it's a red that has a slight tinge of the red violet, a slightly cooler red. It's not red violet. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it is a bit cooler than a warmer red. And when a red is a bit cooler, it has some of that red violet in it. Just a little bit. And that red really helps to spark up the whole illustration. And a saturated red like this is a good choice for sparking up the illustration. So if the color design looks a little too dull, artists will add this kind of stronger color accent, more saturated color. So looking at my rough sketch here, it could use a little sparking up to make it look more exciting. And just like what Peak did, I can do the same here by adding a saturated red, let's say right here like that. A really strong red falling on him, strong red light. And you can see that that really sparks up what would otherwise appear a bit too dull looking. The red on the cape I need to get rid of. It's a little too much. Color needs to be organized, just like values need to be organized. And Peak organizes his color according to a gesture, and that gesture is the diagonal gesture. So he arranges his colors according to that diagonal gesture. So it's like this. Here's the big head of Clint Eastwood, the fist, and then that same color is repeated with variation according to that diagonal there. That's where he places his darks. They form a diagonal, and then, of course, the red accent is a diagonal. So all of these colors and tones are arranged according to that diagonal gesture. That organizes them. That keeps them from being scattered all over the place. If you've watched my videos on composition, you will have learned that You can also use geometric shapes to organize the color and tones. So I could have Clint Eastwood's head there, and then these other characters, they all fall within this triangle shape, and the darks also fall within that triangle shape. And I could even then add a color, a red color there, like that. But all of this falls within a geometric triangle shape, and I could have a couple of shapes that are disconnected from that main triangle shape, and then these other characters here, and the truck over here. So something like that, just keeping everything very rough. So all of this taken together is organized by way of this triangle. While here, I use the triangle, you can also just use gestures like I mentioned with the diagonal, or it could be a curve, could be a horizontal, or a vertical. I'm going to show you how the great illustrator Bob Peak designed his illustrations. Here's a page from the textbook from one of the famous artist school's art courses, in which they showed how Bob Peak worked out the illustrations for the movie Grand Prix. And these illustrations were meant to be the movie posters for Grand Prix. Here you can see Peak's unique approach to solving the client's problems. Peak tried to capture the speed and energy and excitement of the Grand Prix race. In the caption that you see there, I'm going to read that. It says, faculty members Bob Peak and Al Parker were both in Monte Carlo during the running of the Grand Prix. Their impressions of the race are recorded here. Peak's paintings are based on photographs he kept taking during his 17th day stay in Monaco, some of which are shown at the top of page 13. I'm going to move this page up, and here you see a couple more of his superb and unique illustrations for the Grand Prix movie. I'm going to read the caption here. So it says, these pictures are studies for a poster Peak designed to advertise a movie based on the big race, says Peak. The experience, just being there, was one of my most memorable adventures. A racer himself, the artist has projected the excitement, glamour, and thrills of the Grand Prix into his pictures. He dramatizes splashy color, high style, feverish excitement, the roaring crowd, and outstanding personalities, all the elements that make the race a fabulous newsmaking event. This is a collage combining photography and drawing and painting, and it's the rough sketch, not the finished illustration. Peak uses what is called the surround compositional concept to arrange the shapes. Something like this. So he has the figures, and they're in a triangle, something like this, just really rough. Then he places all of the other images like this, you see, around the main subject. And over here, different size shapes, and a shape right there between her legs, like that. These images surround the center of interest, the main characters. So to simplify this even more, something like this. So there's the triangle, and then adding the other shapes around the main subject. Something like that, you see? And that helps to draw attention to the main characters in the center. So looking at his sketch here, it's like this. So here is the triangle, and then all these other images, all these shapes. See, right there between her legs, and all these shapes surround the main subject here. So that's a surround compositional concept. And he's done this a number of times in his illustrations. And this kind of arrangement invites the viewer to move along all these shapes, all of what's going on here. So you're moving around the composition like that. So you're looking at one scene after another in a circular movement like that. Even in a rough sketch like this, he's already applying these ideas of composition. Peak knows how to make a dynamic and expressive pose. So the whole figure here leans like that. and the arm out like that on the hip, and the leg out like that. That makes for an expressive looking pose, a dynamic pose. The woman is the largest shape because Peak wants her to be the center of interest, and the man isn't as important as she is, and therefore he places him behind her, somewhat hidden. When it comes to color, Peak is a master of color design. Peak applies color patterns. All these colors here, you see, they're all closely related, forming this family of reddish colors, making this kind of shape. There are varying shades of red, violet, and red, but because they're all in the red family, they hold together like this, making that kind of shape. It's important to create these kind of color pattern shapes, and you play one against others. Like, for example, right over here, there's a different kind of color pattern shape, and that's, of course, more of a yellow. And over here, and he repeats that yellow over here, and on her hat, the dress over here. So a little bit of yellow over on that side, over here, and of course up here. So these are disconnected, but your eye moves from one yellow shape to another, and this yellow pattern shape is easily seen because he places it against a contrasting color, the red. So he's playing one color pattern shape against another, and he's playing the warmer reddish colors against the cooler green color that you see there and there, and over here and here and here and here and there. He's creating strong, warm, and cool color contrasts, which makes for exciting looking color. And then he has the warmest color, which is seen here on the arm and the face, and over here, which is orange. So those warm colors are placed against the cooler reddish colors, and that helps to create emphasis here. So you're looking at the woman and the man, where those warm, cool color contrasts occur, and the little bit of white accent that he adds there helps to draw your attention to the man. The extreme contrast in sizes between the cars that you see here and the larger shapes creates strong size contrast, which creates a lot of interest. And because that shape is detached and small like that, your attention is drawn to those shapes, those cars there. And then, of course, you see photographs here and here and here and here and here, here and down here. But then he also does drawings. Buildings that you see here, the characters here, here. So he's combining photographs with drawing and painting, creating a collage. Peak likes to add patterns in his illustrations, and patterns can help to create emphasis and interest. So you see a pattern here on her pants, repetition of the circle and the square, and they create an alternating pattern of shapes. Then, of course, there's a pattern right there, and a pattern over here on those glasses, and a pattern right here. So let's say you start out with a black and white image like this, and you want to add color. What students who haven't really learned what makes good color design do is what I'm going to be showing you now. This is bad color design. So if you're doing something like this and you think you're doing good color design, well, you're not doing good color design. This is good color design, what Peak did here. And in this example, which so many students do, there are just too many colors. Then there are no clear color pattern shapes. When you look at Peak's illustration, you see clear color pattern shapes, the ones that I pointed out. And there are a limited number of colors that he uses, but he creates variations of those colors. Unlike what you see in this example, in which there are almost all of the colors on the color wheel, which are way too many colors to use. These different hues here, they create a kind of mosaic of colors, where the eye is jumping around from one color to the next, all over the place. And there's no place to rest. There's no place for the eye to go and Therefore, there is no center of interest here. Every color is competing with every other color. If you want to create good color design, you need to be able to create good color pattern shapes and use fewer colors, and you can still get rich looking color because of the variations that you create with those fewer colors. You could even do an entire illustration with just 2 colors, like the complementary colors, for example, of, let's say, yellow-green and red-violet. So you might say, well, just 2 colors, how can that be interesting? Well, it can be interesting because you create variations of those 2 colors. You can get a wide variety of different colors just from creating variations of these 2 colors. So something like this, for example, picked up the red-violet, and then I'll repeat it over here. Then I'll pick up the yellow-green, add a little bit of that yellow-green in there, mix it in with the red-violet, and I get something like this. Then I'll pick up that red-violet. This time I'll add a little less of the yellow-green, and I get a different looking color, a muted color, in other words, or grayed color, as it's also referred to for colors that have been desaturated. Then, in order to darken those colors, you can use black, for example. So I'm going to add the black over here. And then if I wanted a darker version of this color right there, all I need to do is add some black, and that will give me a darker version of that color, a shade of that color. When you add black to a color, it creates a shade of that color. And then I could also add white. So I could pick up that color again, put it over here, and I'll pick up the white right there in the middle of the circle, add a little bit of that white. It desaturates that color even more, and I have a tint of that color now. So you see, you can get a wide variety of different looking colors. So I'm going to take this mess and redo it. And here's what it looks like, redone. And you can see that I've created these color pattern shapes. Fewer colors are used. Variations of those colors are used. Here's what Peak's color design looks like. And here's mine. As you can see, I changed the colors. So I have the colors grouped, which creates these color pattern shapes. So all these here, the blues, blue violets, all of these together, they form an overall color pattern shape because all these colors are closely related. They form this pattern shape of color, and then there's a blue over here and a blue violet over there. All of this together like that creates another smaller color pattern shape. And then I use the color accent that you see right there. Those warmer colors are placed against these cooler colors here, coming around like this. All of these are cooler colors, and therefore placing a warm color against a cool color creates an accent and draws your eye to this spot of warmer color. And there's a lot of color repetition and color variation, color rhythm going on here. And greens and blue greens are all grouped together like this, and yellow greens, they're all in the green family. If you want good color, you need to have good value relationships. Enough contrast between the colors in terms of their values will go a long way in creating good looking color. I'm going to turn it into black and white so you can see the value relationships here, the dark values of the woman and the man in the foreground and the lighter values behind them, and that helps to create a feeling of depth and emphasis also, because your eye is drawn to these darker shapes placed against these lighter value pattern shapes. So there are value pattern shapes and there are color pattern shapes. That's what makes good color design. When you apply the principles of design to color, you get good color design. For those of you who can see the importance of what I'm showing you here, and you apply this to your own color, you'll see an immense improvement in your color. You will be getting color design into your color, unlike what you see in this example, where there is no color design. There is no organized color here. I see a lot of pictures like this, where the artist just doesn't have the knowledge of what makes good color design. And they throw every color on the color wheel into their illustration, or for that matter, concept art. And that does not make for good color. This is what makes for good color. Now, when it comes to values, many students, they'll have too much midtone, like what you see here. Students won't have enough value contrast, and that's what's lacking here. Since Peak wants to create an exciting mood, strong value contrast would be needed, which helps to create drama. Peak would do a lot of these little thumbnail sketches like what you see here. It would work out the value pattern with these thumbnails. You can try out different value patterns, like, for example, the dark here. If it's too dark in relation to the midtone, which is a lighter tone here, a lighter midtone, so maybe the value range needs to be compressed a little bit more so that instead of this darker tone, maybe there's a lighter tone like that. That might work better to create the mood. But in this case, where a more exciting feeling or mood needs to be established, the stronger value contrast would be the one to go with, which is what Peak went with. So just as with the color pattern shapes, you need to create value pattern shapes. So in this case here, for example, I could do something like this, where I group all of these values together, where the values are close to each other, where there isn't strong value contrast between them. And when that happens, then those values are grouped together and they form a value pattern shape. So I could select maybe something like this, in which these values are close together on the value scale, for example. They all fall into a light midtone value range. Now I could change those values, let's say, to a darker value range, like this. Some values are lighter, some a bit darker, but they all fall within a dark value range. All grouped together like that, they form a dark value pattern shape. And then I could play that dark value pattern shape against a lighter value pattern shape. Something like this, for example. Now, obviously, I'm doing this really quick and very rough. It's not going to be perfect. So now I have this light value pattern shape, like this. So all of that are lighter values. Some lighter values are a bit darker, some a bit lighter, so there's some variation of values within that overall light value pattern shape set against the darker value pattern shape, in which there are variations of the values, some values lighter, some darker, as you can see here. But the overall value pattern shape is dark. And then I have another value pattern shape over here, which is the middle value pattern shape, middle values. So it's like this: dark value pattern shape, light value pattern shape, and then middle value pattern shape. And I'm applying fewer values, just like I was applying fewer values to the color pattern shapes. So I'm just touching upon this. I mean, if you want to learn a lot more, then you might want to check out my complete illustration art course. If you're really serious about wanting to become an illustrator, then you should be studying every day, hours every day. And unfortunately, if the desire isn't there to want to study every day for hours and to draw every day for hours and to practice all of this, then you're not going to make it. There are plenty of other students that would be willing to go through that because they have that strong desire to want to learn. That's what it takes. Here you see another example in which Peak uses that surround concept. So in the center, he places the main interest, and then surrounding the main interest, you see all of these movie stars like this, and down here, over here, like that. So it makes this kind of surround compositional concept. The center of interest here isn't placed exactly in the center of the picture area. He moved it over a bit, so it's about there. And you can see that there's more space on the right side here than there is on the left side, so he didn't center the center of interest. When designing this composition, most likely Peak will have done something like what I'll just quickly do now. So he will have started with the center of interest. So he establishes his shape here first, and then he places the movie stars into that shape. But then over on the left and the right side, those movie star heads, they are all overlapping and grouping together, and they form a shape like this kind of shape, you see? And the same on the other side as well. All these heads and the figures, they're overlapping, creating an overall shape, something like that. So he groups them, and that helps to organize the shapes of the heads so that they don't look scattered all around. Now, to add those heads there of the movie stars, most likely he didn't just start adding heads like this, you see? He needed to first establish a large shape that would help to organize those heads. And therefore, what he most likely did was he added some kind of shape here like this, a large shape, and then the same on the other side. So he has his big shapes that he establishes first. Those shapes determine where he's going to place his smaller shapes. And then once he has those big shapes, then he adds the smaller shapes of the movie star heads like that, grouping them all together, something like this. And then he adds that other movie star up here, Zorro, and then the other one down here like that. This idea of first establishing the big shapes is very important when designing a composition. Don't start with the small shapes. Start with the big shapes because, like I said, they help to organize the smaller shapes. And while he was doing all of this, he had that surround compositional concept in mind. And in this Bob Peak movie poster for the movie Camelot, again, he uses this compositional surround concept where he has a central shape around which he places all these other shapes like this going around that central shape. And within that central shape is where the center of interest is found. When it comes to color, you need to establish a dominant color temperature. And in this illustration, the dominant color temperature is a warm color temperature. And the same kind of dominant color temperature is found in this illustration, which is also a warm color temperature. So you see the warm colors, yellows, yellow-oranges, and reds and oranges, red-orange, placed against an off-black background. Now I say off-black because it's not a pure black. It may look like a pure black, but it's really not. It's an off-black. Just like there's an off-white, there's also an off-black, where you don't exactly go to a pure black. And that really dark tone there helps to have all these shapes of the movie stars really stand out from the background. They read clearly, in other words. Now, into these warm colors, yellows and oranges, red-orange and red, he places little spots of cool accent colors like you see over here. The blue-green, green up here, blue-green, blue. So he places them around the main area of interest, little spots of contrasting cool color to add variety and interest, and to help some shapes stand out against the background, like what you see here. The cooler color stands out against the warmer color, and the little spots of cool color added like that all around helps the eye to move from one cool color to another, and to another, around like that. When it comes to texture, Peak uses textures in an interesting way. He has the texture of the hair here placed against the face, which doesn't have any texture, just a smooth, flat white shape. Now, this face here also doesn't really have any texture, just a smooth, flat color shape. And both of these are placed against a textured background that you see there. So no texture here, placed against a textured background. That creates a nice contrast and interest. When this sort of thing is done, so let's say I'm going to do a Formula One racing car illustration taking place in Monaco, like what Peak did, and Al Parker, he was also there. And the illustrations that Al Parker did, they appeared in Sports Illustrated, while Bob Peak's illustrations were done for movie posters. The way you'd start is the way I've been showing in my videos, if you've watched them and learned from them. You begin with an idea, of course. That's the starting point, the concept, the idea. And the idea, like I said, is of a racing car. Now, you have to think about all of the different aspects of the Grand Prix race. There are the spectators, there are the cars, there are the race car drivers, there is the speed, there is the power that these cars have. And I think I want to try to convey the power of these race cars. So I would start off with some kind of thumbnail sketches thinking of the car, and I'm thinking maybe I'm going to base the composition on triangle. So that becomes the design theme, triangle like this, and that also expresses feeling of speed because you're moving back into the distance to a vanishing point here like this, you see? And when the cars are moving forward and these lines are moving back to a vanishing point, that gives the illusion of speed. So I'm thinking of adding a vanishing point back here, and then here's the road. See these lines going back, creating a triangle. So that triangle is going to be repeated everywhere. And then let's say there are going to be buildings over here. I'll just roughly indicate them there. And going back in perspective to that vanishing point, 1 point perspective. Then the racing car, the Formula One race car, would be in the extreme foreground like this at an angle, and the car and the wheels here really large, dark value pattern. But then I'm thinking, well, this is going to be too symmetrical. What I have on the left side, I'm going to have on the right side. And that makes for a more boring design, usually. So what do you do in a case like this? Well, what I could do is, I'm thinking of adding another car, race car, in front of this one here, which is actually the main subject, the main center of interest there. But I'm adding another one over here to the right, breaking up this side of the race car so that the car doesn't look symmetrical. I have something different on this side than I have what is on the left side. So let's say I'm breaking the rules here of placement. I'm going to place the race car driver right at the edge, cutting off part of his face. That's breaking a rule. And the great illustrator Bernie Fuchs, he would do something like that occasionally, where he would place a figure right at the border and then crop off some of that figure. So something like this maybe. So here's the car in front of this car, and then I'm going to add a few other race cars back here, like this, getting smaller as they move back into the distance. So something like that. So that's one of the ideas for this composition. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to develop this further. Color needs to be added. And remember, you need to think in terms of color pattern shapes. What's the color scheme? Well, maybe red and blue. To help express the excitement of the race, I use contrasting or opposing hues. I'm thinking of making this car here red, like that, keeping things really simple at this stage. And tires are a darker red. And then these tires in the foreground for this other racer that is over here on the right side. And I think I'm going to make him blue. I'm going to bring in the color picker, and I'm going to add the blue helmet, and these wheels would also be blue, really dark blue. Then I'm going to repeat that blue on this car here, the red car. Then I'm going to add the blue to the background here, so all of this is going to be blue. I'm playing the red against the blue. All of that becomes a blue color pattern shape, like that blue in the foreground. And then I have the red color pattern shape against the blue. And I'll repeat that red on the car in back of the large car in the foreground. And repeat some of that red also in the buildings somewhere here. And I'm repeating that red in the race car in back of the large racing car. And the light is coming from the top down like that. So the top planes will be getting the light, more saturated color, something like this, let's say. And for the blue, more saturated blue here, and lighter in value, something like that. And the race car driver's helmet, I think I'm going to make red. And I'm going to add some yellow back here like that. So these warmer colors here, more saturated colors against the cooler colors surrounding them, helps to draw your attention here, creating an area of emphasis. Principle of design called emphasis is applied. And some of this darker gray or red I'm going to repeat over here where this guy is. That's his face. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enlarge this sketch. Maybe something like that. So that's going to serve as my guide to doing a much more advanced color sketch based on this rough sketch here. I'm going to work on that more advanced color sketch, but you won't see me working on it because it's going to take quite a while to do. And I can't show you every single thing that I would be doing for that color sketch because that would just take too long. As I'm looking at my color sketch here, I'm thinking of changing the background color. Right now it's more of a blue, and that gives the sketch a feeling of a cooler day, but I want that day to look a bit warmer since there is light falling on some parts, like here where the race car is. And having more blue like this, that also suggests that it's a overcast day, which gives a more cool appearance to colors. Because the objects are not receiving the warm sunlight, they're getting the light from the cool blue sky coming down and cooling the whole scene a bit too much. And because I want to be more imaginative with the color, I can take certain liberties to make a more interesting and exciting looking color design. So I'm going to quickly change the colors here to this color. More of a violet, leaning a little in the direction of blue-violet, or shifting a little in that direction. I think I have to add a bit more blue. Color's a little too violet, so I'm adding that now. I think that's better. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a much more advanced color sketch based on this rough sketch. It's going to be more like a color comp, but it's still not going to be finished art because that would just take too long to do. But it'll come somewhat close to what the finished art might look like. Matter of fact, sometimes artists prefer their rough color sketches over their finished art, because the rough color sketches, they have a freedom and spontaneity to them. They look like they were done effortlessly, and that gives them great appeal. They don't have that labored look that too many finished illustrations have. That's one of the reasons why Bernie Fuchs's illustrations have a more sketch-like look to them. He liked that kind of style, that more loose, sketch-like style. So now let me show you the more advanced color sketch. And here's my more advanced color sketch based on my little rough sketch here. And as you can see, I kept the same color scheme and composition. A lot of diagonals are added to make a more dynamic composition. So you see a diagonal here, here, of course, here, here. They're all over. And up here, diagonal back here where the buildings are. Diagonal here, here, here. And then I repeated the triangle shape. That's the underlying design theme that establishes a structure of triangles of different sizes throughout. Like, for example, there's a triangle here, you see? And then another triangle on this side here, triangle. And then there are triangles within the race car here. So you see triangle here without the point added. It still belongs to the triangle family. Triangle here, here, and on this side, triangle there. Little triangle over here. And of course, triangles back here like that. This whole thing makes a kind of a triangle. And there's a triangle there as well. So they're all over the place. Then the predominant color is a blue-violet, shifting slightly in the direction of violet. And there's other color repetition going on. That's a principle of design. You see the red repeated everywhere, here, here, even in the shadows, those are reds. leaning or shifting slightly in the direction of red-violet to cool them down. Red here, red back here. They're being repeated all over. And of course, the blue-violet is also being repeated everywhere with variations. Now, since the blue-violet is what predominates, that makes up a blue-violet color field against which I place these blue color pattern shapes. And back here, smaller color pattern shapes, even on the small race car back here. Some blue over here, here. Large sizes, smaller sizes. All this variety in sizes of these color pattern shapes help to add interest. The repetition of the red helps to unify the color design, as well as the repetition of the blue-violet, of course, adds to creating unity of color. Adding this blue color against the red and blue-violet creates a focal point here, or area of interest. The center of interest, in other words, is found here because of the emphasis that is created here because of the warm-cool color contrast. And this is where the principle of the spot comes in, because all of this blue, it makes a kind of spot against the blue-violet and red. So it stands out against those other colors. And then there are smaller spots of blue repeated here and there and here. Now, I can't point out everything that I've done here. That would just take too long. And of course, I have the red color pattern shape here. All of this with the variations of the red, all of that taken together makes an overall red color pattern shape. And then I add the smaller color pattern shapes that you see here that are red. And here. Little spots applied different places, even here, here, and over there. Lots of repetition. But of course, the large red makes this larger red color pattern shape. And then those other smaller reds, they're just like little spots repeated here and there, which helps to unify the color design. In other words, it contributes to making the color design look more unified. And to keep the composition from appearing too symmetrical, I made the right side here look different from the left side. And that helps to create a more interesting design. And I'm breaking a rule here with this kind of extreme cropping of the race car and the head of the race car driver. Not always following the rules can result in a more interesting and exciting looking design. Now, to help draw more attention to this area here, what I could do is I could make that yellow a bit more saturated, like that. And that's the only place where this yellow appears. See, that draws your eye there. That's all I'm going to do on this color sketch. And now I want to show you some more illustrations by Bob Peak. And again, you can see that this illustration has to do with race cars. And here you see clear two-dimensional color pattern shapes. There's no chiaroscuro, that is light and shadow. Everything's kept more flat. That's the style that Peak wanted for this illustration. And you can see the various colored color pattern shapes. All of this here, of course, as you can see, is a red color pattern shape. Then all of this down here is another one, including that shadow there, that darker red. And of course, he adds a red on the left side to balance the reds that are on the right side. And then he has blue and blue-violet. So this is the blue-violet. This, of course, is the blue. And since they are right next to each other on the color wheel, all of these blues can be taken together as part of a blue color pattern shape. So something like this for that. And then, of course, this blue color pattern shape here coming around like this, over like that. And of course, this one and this also. That's more of a blue-violet. So that's the cool color pattern shape made up of the blue and blue-violet. And let's not forget the number 1 here, which is also part of that cooler blue-violet color pattern shape. And then up here also, and over here, smaller shapes, larger shapes. These different size color pattern shapes add interest. Also over here, he has a blue, like this, blue color pattern shape. And then, of course, he has the yellow-orange color pattern shape placed against the blue color pattern shape. So he's playing warm against cool, cool against warm. Here's the warm against the cool, but then over here, you see the opposite. You see the cool blue against the hot red. He's applying the principle of design called interchange, and I've covered this in some of my videos that you might have seen. And then Peak uses pure black that you see here, and he uses pure white that you see here and here and here. Down here, of course, that's blue color pattern shape, and you have to make these shapes interesting. Peak is able to use pure black and pure white because this is a stylized illustration. He's not trying to be realistic here. There is a certain amount of realism, but it's not very realistic. It's not the kind of realism that you get when you apply chiaroscuro, light and shadow, careful modeling and nuances of color and tone. Here, it's more of these flat color pattern shapes that are used, resulting in a more stylized look. And when it comes to the area of interest, right here, for example, everyone's looking at the driver, as you can see. So the viewer's attention is directed here to where the driver is, and Peak gives the driver a red helmet, a warm color, placed against the cooler blues surrounding it, thereby creating an area of emphasis. Draws your eye right there to the driver. So this is where the principle of the spot comes in, a spot of red against the cooler blue surrounding it. So this, of course, is the main interest, and this is the secondary interest. There's lots of color linking and color repetition going on, all part of good color design. See the light tone here. All of this light tone is linked together, creating that kind of shape. These darks, the dark blues, here are linked together. All of this is linked together because of the similarity of the value and color. Repetition of the white, of course, is occurring. And white here, here. And there's white in here with these blue stripes, but it looks like a light value pattern shape, close to looking like white, but not quite. Now this white is linked with the white of this character here. Peak applies color rhythm. So here there is yellow, here there's yellow-orange, and that difference, that variation, sets up a color rhythm, but there's also color repetition. The red over here is being repeated here and up here and here and here. Color repetition helps to unify a color design. There's so much more that's going on here. There's no time for me to point out everything that Peak is doing. What makes this visually exciting is design. Peak is a superb master of design. Here's another illustration by Bob Peak, and this is a real beauty. So as you can see, all of this makes a green color pattern shape, and then he places a small color pattern shape against all of that green over here where the face is. That is still a color pattern shape. Doesn't matter how small or how big it is. It still makes a color pattern shape, and that's how it needs to be thought of. You can have small color pattern shapes, and you can have large color pattern shapes. And he places this green against a neutral background. This is a true gray background that he places that green against, and that makes that green, therefore, look vibrant and saturated, but not overly saturated. Not like this, for example. He keeps that green a bit more subdued, like that. And he places that green color pattern shape against the gray pattern shape. And on the other side, those grays make shapes, interesting shapes. They are the negative space, which make negative shapes, and they're made interesting. They're of different sizes, as you can see, and different shapes, but they all have the same similar character to them. For those of you who really understand and get the importance of what I've shown you here, and you apply what you've learned from this video to your own illustrations or concept art, you're going to see a big improvement in your work. Good color pattern shapes are what's missing in student work, even in some more professional artist work. So I want to show you this. This is a color sketch that one of the instructors at the famous artist schools made. Before he did this sketch, he did this sketch in which he worked out the color patterns. And as you can see here, these color pattern shapes are all flat shapes. This helped him to more clearly see what these color pattern shapes look like and how they relate to other color pattern shapes, which helped him in deciding if these colors need to be changed in some way or keep them the way they are. So this is a good way to work out your color pattern shapes, just with flat shapes like this. So I see a color pattern shape here, this green color pattern shape right there, her skin color, her hair, different size color pattern shapes. And within each color pattern shape, there's going to be color variation. So for example, if I add the shadow here, like this, I'm adding a variation of color within this green color pattern shape. And up here like this. But even though I've added that shadow, which is a different color, it's part of the green color pattern shape. The shadow color is still a green, but as you can see, it's a darker, more grayed green. And I need to add a bit more of the blue-green, more like that, you see. Then I can add the shadow color where her armpit is and where her neck is. So I'm not going to do the whole thing. I think you get the idea. So now we've come to the end of this video. As always, I thank you for taking the time to watch this video. And please tell all your friends about my videos. Help me get the word around about my online art academy art school. Please share this video with people that you know are interested in wanting to learn art. That'll help to get the word around about my videos. And if you want to learn a lot more about color and about all of the various fundamentals that you're going to need to know a lot about and understand a lot about, then you'll learn that through my complete illustration art course. There is so much more to learn about color and composition. And obviously I can't cover everything in these videos that I have at my YouTube channel, for example. There's a lot more to learn. And if you think you've learned everything already, well, then you really don't know just how much more there is to learn. And the more you learn, the more knowledge you gain, the better your art is going to get if you're able to apply what you've learned. If you think you've learned everything and that there is nothing more to learn, that's when you stop growing as an artist. That's when you stop getting better as an artist. There is no end to learning. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel yet, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe. That would help me. And if you like this video, please don't forget to give me a thumbs up. And if you have something to say, please leave a comment down below. Also, in addition to my complete illustration art course, I have another course that has been designed for young people ages 12 and up. And there is a link down below to the Young People's Art Course that you might want to check out. And I also have a mini course based on the textbook that the great illustrator Austin Briggs put together for the famous artist schools. And there's a link down below to the Austin Briggs course. And now I say to you, adios.